Hi, everybody. Thank you for calling in. We are going to get started, so you should be able to see the first slide on our presentation, and I'm going to hand it over to Tammy to welcome everybody.
Thanks, Lauren. So that was Lauren Popluck. Lauren is part of our public affairs team here at ALS Canada, and I'm the CEO, Tammy Moore. We also have with us Lisa Marquito, who is our VP of Marketing and Public Affairs, who's here from ALS Canada, and soon we'll be introducing the Advocacy Solutions team. So welcome to everybody, and thank you for joining us. We're here today to talk about the access to Radicava issue and talk about ways that our community can help to advocate to ensure that we are able to get drug access for all Canadians. The bulk of today's presentation is going to focus on the advocacy package, which Advocacy Solutions will be going over. That will help to give people the tools that they need to inform them so that they're able to conduct their own meetings with government officials and to be able to help ensure that we are all on the same page and reports are able to go back and forth so that we can build from the teams, from the work of each individual. And then we'll talk about how you can get involved. So again, just a reminder as we go to the next slide and our welcome from ALS Canada. So our advocacy team not only is the staff that we have in some of our internal resources, it's also the partner consultants that we work with, as we mentioned with Advocacy Solutions. And of course, really important are the voices of our community who choose to come forward to be able to help to support the asks and bring forward the needs of our community. I'd just like to acknowledge that in our very first slide, actually there on the left, that Mike Ranney was a wonderful voice in our community, and unfortunately Mike lost his battle with ALS earlier this year. So we do remember Mike and send condolences to his family. And of course, we all remember Eddie and how he was such a tireless advocate. So where we are today, we are more than 1 year post-Health Canada approval. That happened in October 2018, and yet Radicava is still not accessible through public reimbursements to Canadians living with ALS. This is in spite of the urgent unmet need, and we do know that there are a number of ways that Radicava or the generic form are coming through Canada, or are coming into Canada and getting in the hands of Canadians. What we're really interested in ensuring that there's timely, equitable, and affordable access for all Canadians, because not all of the pathways that are available at this time establish those three things for every person. So we want to make sure that we give the option for individuals and families to urge private and public drug plans to have access without delay. So just to again go over the progress to date, in May 2017, on that Friday, we saw FDA grant approval to the therapy. We immediately started advocating to the company to make sure that they understood that Canada could be a marketplace for them. And they did apply to Health Canada and were granted a priority review in the spring of 2018, which then had them go through the first process as a 6-month priority review, and Health Canada granted them a notice of compliance, or an NOC, to be able to then deem that the drug was safe for sale in Canada. From there, further pieces are necessary, so we can have drug approval, which is Health Canada, but then we have the decisions around reimbursement, and CADTH did their first, CADTH and INES, which is the Quebec version, did their reviews in January and March of 2019. And as of September 30th, 2019, we understood that Radicava was on the list of drugs that the group called the Pan-Canadian Pharmaceutical Alliance was starting to negotiate with. So that is the PCPA are the provincial payers across the country who choose to participate. Two of the provincial organizations will be the lead negotiators, and then other provinces can choose to be engaged or disengaged as they see fit. We have been speaking to PCPA to understand where they are in the process, And we do understand that active negotiations are underway, although it's unclear which provinces are still involved in that process and which have chosen to step out. Even when a PCPA decision has been made, there still has to be individual provincial negotiations that would then go on, and individual provinces will make the determination of whether or not they will put the drug onto their provincial formularies, which would mean there would be a public payer reimbursement system at that point. So even with a PCPA decision, it could still be lengthy and definitely different across the country, as each province individually will be making their own decisions. On November 5th, 2019, the company made Radicava commercially available to Canadians. What that did mean was that if an insurance company was choosing to reimburse, they would be able to purchase the commercially available product. And what they were attempting to do at that point was to have a patient support program that would help to support Canadians to be able to access through their insurance program. They have put in place a patient support program to be able to do that. And what they were attempting to do was to transition people from the special access program that had been making about 200 placements available to Canadians. At that time, we were concerned that the generic form and the way that people were bringing it into Canada through the personal importation would be closed. And what ended up happening, we worked with Health Canada, and they chose to leave that window open for personal importation until April 2020. We are in ongoing communications with them as to the reimbursement and negotiation timelines to understand how that may impact the April 2020 decisions that they may make around personal importation. So why are we doing this work? We want to make sure that drugs for therapies for people living with ALS don't get stuck through this process. And as we can see already, that we could have drug approvals that had been granted in 2018 and are yet to be in the hands of Canadians. That's concerning because obviously this could be precedent setting for future therapies that come to market. So as well as this one, we want to ensure that the system itself hears from our community and understands the significant unmet need and the personal toll that this takes, so that they are more influenced to be making appropriate decisions to support our community into the future. And so with this, today is our third webinar that we have now hosted. We have had a letter writing campaign to be able to help to raise this issue. We have just over 2,000 letters that have already been sent by community members to their MLAs or MPPs requesting that this be considered, and with a request to the Minister of Health in each of the provinces as well. So although this is one initiative too, I do want to state that this is not the only initiative that ALS Canada is doing. We're working with the companies, industry partners, to be able to ensure that others are considering what needs to be done to make sure that therapies come to market. But at this time, we are focused with our community on this issue because it's the most immediate and the one where it is most appropriate to be pressing a button, if you will, because this drug at this point does seem to be somewhat stuck in the reimbursement decision process. So at this point, I'm going to turn the meeting over to Lisa Marquito, and she'll be speaking to you about the advocacy packages. And I guess just to state too, if you do have questions, I think we're able to take questions by typing them into the text box on the side of your webinar, so that we'll be able to respond accordingly. Lisa.
Hi everybody, it's Lisa speaking. I'm going to keep it pretty brief before turning it over to Ryan and the Advocacy Solutions team. Tammy mentioned that this is the third webinar that we have held around Radicava and access to therapies. So if you've participated in the previous ones, We started off with a webinar on the drug access pathway and just having an overview of how drugs come to be approved in Canada and made available to Canadians in ideally as affordable a way as possible. We then followed that up just before the holidays with kind of an Advocacy 101, which focused on how to be an effective advocate. Shortly after that, we soft launched the letter writing campaign that Tammy mentioned, and then earlier this year in January, that was launched publicly, which has resulted in about the 2,000 letters being sent so far. We are starting to hear from more people about whether or not they've been successful in being covered through their private insurance, which, you know, for those who have private insurance plans that are covering is, you know, a good way for them to be able to access. But as Tammy mentioned, we're interested in equitable access and affordable access for all Canadians. And so that's where we have the opportunity through this campaign to help to make that happen and make our voices heard. The advocacy packages, the link you can see on the slide, they're now online. They're customized by province, and the reason for that is because the reimbursement decisions, as Tammy mentioned, are made at a province by province level. And so what Advocacy Solutions is going to take you through now, and what we're going to spend the bulk of our time on this evening, is how to actually use those pieces in the advocacy package to engage your elected official, whether an MPP or an MLA, to perhaps play a more active role. I imagine many of you on the line have already participated through the letter writing campaign, which is something that you can do online from your home. The opportunity with the advocacy packages is to be more active in requesting meetings, and we want to support you in how to navigate those meetings and be successful in making your request heard, and how to do that in a way that's going to resonate with elected officials. So like I said, that will be our focus, and I'm going to turn it over to Ryan and the team now to take everybody through what's in those advocacy packages.
Great, thanks, Lisa. It's Ryan Clark from Advocacy Solutions. Pleasure to be with you again. Just before we jump into this this first document, I just wanted to mention that, as Lisa mentioned, just to reiterate, that on the previous webinar we introduced the advocacy packages, but on this one we're going to really focus on how to use them in the context of this campaign. You may recall that some of the materials are meant to be used as written, for example, the key facts document, while others are templates meant to be altered somewhat, for example, the letter to the minister, both of which we'll talk about in a moment. I'm going to make the distinction as we go through about which documents are meant to be altered and which ones aren't, so that you know exactly going into this what you're to do with each one. So this first document, the Introduction to Advocates, is not meant to be altered. It's essentially the overview or guide to the rest of the materials that you will be utilizing. The campaign in this particular case, the campaign for Radicava, is pretty straightforward. It's to engage the provinces to request that Radicava be accessible through public funding as an option for people living with ALS. This summary document is used to do three primary things. Number one, to explain to people what this campaign is about in more detail, as you can see there. Number two, to motivate them to participate, people like yourself and others to participate in the campaign. And then finally, to provide them with some key links to find your provincial representative, to email your provincial Minister of Health, and to get more information from ALS Canada. So all of those things are contained in this one document. Now, what you may notice is that on this particular document in front of you, you see the acronym MPP, Member of Provincial Parliament. And you may hear us talk about MPPs and MLAs and all the rest of it. Let me just take a moment to explain what all of those acronyms are and why they're different, so that you have clarity, because as Lisa mentioned, these packages are done by province, so you're going to see different terms depending on the province. At the federal level, and this is not a federal campaign, we have MPs, Members of Parliament. In Ontario, at the provincial level, we have MPPs, members of provincial parliament. In Quebec, they're called MNAs, members of the National Assembly. In Newfoundland and Labrador, they're called MHAs, members of the House of Assembly. And in the rest of the country, the other 7 provinces and the 3 territories, they're called MLAs, members of the Legislative Assembly. So don't get confused when you see all these different acronyms. Just focus on the one, of course, that's pertinent to your particular province. If we go to the next slide, this second document is absolutely meant to be altered, specifically to add some content around your personal story. I can't emphasize enough the importance of taking, 5 or 10 minutes or so to insert some personal text about the link that you have to ALS between paragraphs 1 and 2. It will really set the tone with your provincial representative in terms of how important it is that he or she meet with you. So where you see text in red, anywhere you see text in red on the document to the right, that is where you should insert the content specific to you and your provincial representatives. There is only one objective to this letter, to get a meeting with your provincial representative. So where the text is in black, we ask that you please not alter it because the messaging has been carefully crafted and reviewed for the purposes of this campaign. So as you can see, it asks you to insert your name and address, the date, your MPP's name and address, because this is Ontario, and then dear, your MPP's name, and then your name down at the bottom. And then again, between paragraph 1 and 2, that red text should come out. And in place of the red text, of course, should be, as I said, some information about your link to ALS to personalize it or to customize the letter to some extent. The next document is called a meeting script outline. And it may be altered in one specific place, which I'll touch on in a moment. But other than that, it should remain as is. Your meeting script outline is what should be in front of you, physically in front of you, when you go into the meeting with your provincial representative. Don't give a copy to the person you're meeting with, but you also don't need to hide it. Just place it on the table in front of you or have it within view so that you can refer to it when necessary. This is your guide to getting through your meeting with your MPP in the case of Ontario. The only thing you may want to add to it is embedding your personal story next to number 5. You see where it says 5 about you. It's totally up to you. Some people want everything in the meeting script outline, like on the actual document, while others, when they get to that section, they like to pick up a separate piece of paper or refer to a separate piece of paper and read their personal story. Again, completely up to you, whether you want 2 pieces of paper or 1 piece of paper. And when you get to number 9, I'll just point this out as well. Don't forget to take a picture. There's a reminder there to take a picture of you with your MPP. This is very important so that your provincial ALS Society can compile a visual record of all of your efforts. That's very, very important. So again, your key messages are contained here on this on the sheet of paper, as it were. Your ask is here. It's a step-by-step. So no matter what happens, even if you get taken off on a tangent or something happens where the MPP starts talking about something and you go off somewhere or anything happens, you know where you are. So all you literally have to do is just keep track of where you are in this kind of list of 9 things and which one you've completed and move on to the next one as you're going along. This 4th document, the meeting report back form, is to be altered in the sense that you're meant to fill in some details about how your meeting went. The content requested is pretty straightforward. All I want to emphasize or ask is please take the time to do this. Please fill it out within a day or so of your meeting so that you don't forget anything that you think is important to note. And then please forward it on to your local ALS society. When we get enough of these report back forms in a campaign, they can serve as a critical guide to shaping how we progress and also to potentially alter or adjust what we're doing. So when you look at the prompting questions or the request for information on the left-hand side, you'll see that it's not content heavy, and you'll see that it really shouldn't take more than, again, 5 to 10 minutes to fill out. The only thing that I would point out in particular is the last bullet or the last section where it says other comments or impressions. This is your opportunity to state anything, absolutely anything that stood out to you. It could be something that was said, it could be something that wasn't said at a particular moment in time. It could be body language. It could be a facial expression. These are all things that you're observing in the person that you're that you're meeting with. It could be their tone. It could be any number of things, because it isn't just about what people say to you or back to you as part of this dialogue. You'll notice there's a dialogue portion in the meeting outline, but it's also their physical reaction in a way to what you're saying and how you're presenting that can be equally as important, so that we understand how exactly the meeting went. Moving to the next document, this fifth document may be altered, but you're not the one who alters it. It's the second of two documents that you should hand to your provincial representative during the meeting, which they can then choose to amend before sending off to the Minister of Health on your behalf. So when you get to the number 8 dialogue part of the meeting script outline, this is where you should tell the person that you're meeting with that you have a draft letter for their consideration or guidance in writing to the Minister of Health, because that's your ask. Your ask is that they write a letter to their colleague, the Minister of Health, or to the Minister of Health in the riding, in the province. So tell them that you have a draft letter, hand them a copy of the draft letter, this draft right here, and then tell them that you will forward a Word version of the text within 24 hours so they can prepare a final version they want to send to the minister. So the rationale behind this is very simple. It's to make their life easier. It's to say, I'm not just asking you to write a letter on my behalf to the Minister of Health requesting that Radicava be publicly funded in our province, but I'm going to give you a draft letter. I'm going to give you the information that you need so that you're not scrambling to figure it out in order to send this. But the MPP is entitled to change whatever or not that person decides to change in the context of how they feel comfortable sending it. Remember as well, both in the meeting and in the follow-up email, to ask to be copied on the letter they send to the minister. You want to be copied on this letter. It's actually critically important that you know that your ask was fulfilled, and the only way you will know tangibly is if you get a copy of the letter that was sent from your MPP to the minister. The next document, the 6th document, is separate from the engagement with your provincial representative, but like the letter you sent to them requesting a meeting, it's meant to be altered to add some content around your personal story. It's very comparable in its structure and in its content to the first document that we saw, well, the second document we reviewed, but the first letter that we saw in this package. In fact, we really typically recommend that you simply take the personal text that you prepared previously in the meeting request letter to your MPP and drop it into this letter between paragraphs 1 and 2. Again, I can't emphasize enough the importance of taking a moment to do this. When the minister receives a bunch of these letters, it will be important that they all be personalized to some extent. So again, where you see text in red, this is where you should insert the content specific to you and the minister of Health. So all the previous materials that we've been talking about, as you'll recall from one of the previous webinars that we had, is really focused on getting a meeting with your provincial representative and having them send a letter to the Minister of Health. This document is where you, as a resident of the province, send a letter directly to the Minister of Health, which you're entitled to do, asking that, in the case of Ontario, Minister Elliott publicly fund or ensure that Radicava is publicly funded in the province. And then this final document, the key facts document, should not be altered, but it is the second of two things that you should hand to your provincial representative. You'll recall the first thing is the draft letter for them to send to the minister on your behalf. The second thing is this key facts document. What we usually suggest when you get to this part of the meeting, where you can share with them what we call your core facts, is to hand a copy to the person you're meeting with and then read to them some of the text you think is most impactful. Everything in this document is relevant and important, but if there are some bullets that you think really grab the attention or might grab the attention of your elected representative, or they've grabbed your attention as a person with a link to ALS, then draw their attention to only those in particular and encourage them to read the rest after the meeting concludes, because again, you're going to hand them a copy of this. So, and by the way, ALS can provide a copy of the fact sheet to you, but what you're really meant to do is to take a look at this document and pick out a few, 3, 4, 5 things, whatever it may be, that you think are particularly impactful, and to just, when you get to this part of the meeting flow, just say, I want to just share with you a few key facts or a few core facts about ALS that I think, you know, are relevant to what we're here to talk about today and that you may not know, for example. And then just read those particular ones. You can highlight them or whatever it is you want. And then again, they can feel free to read the rest after the meeting itself, because you've handed them a copy of this document. So that's what I wanted to go through with you in terms of the actual materials that are now available online.
Oh, great, wonderful. Thank you very much, Ryan. So I just wanted to share that if you'll see there at the bottom, there is a website address, als.ca/advocacy/Radicava Advocacy. So just responding publicly to one of the questions that we received, this webinar is being recorded, and when the recording is available, we will be sharing it online at that website. You can also find the 2 previous webinars at that website as well. Our advocacy packages, as well as our e-advocacy tool, can all be found in that spot as well. It's a great hub for all the information that you're looking for about this campaign. We also encourage you to, of course, share on social media and follow us as well as your local society on social media, so that you can tag your local society when you attend your meetings, and you can share that you've participated in the e-advocacy campaign on social media. And so again, that website is where you'll be able to find everything you need about this campaign.
This is Tammy again. I'm beginning to feel like I'm on an old-time radio show as we pass around the phone for the webinar. So we'd like you to stay connected with us. Let us know if you're interested. If you're somebody new to this project with us, please send us an email at advocacy@als.ca. Your name, your province, a little bit about yourself. We'll also share your information with your provincial ALS society so that they can help to support your efforts as well. We did have some questions that came in. One in particular was actually around another therapy and where it stands, and it was around Neuron and Brainstorm. And I think it's important to identify that in order for a drug to come to Canada, the company has to make a decision that Canada will be a marketplace that they're interested in, and they must apply to Health Canada. At this point, the drug has not yet been approved by the FDA in the US. They are awaiting phase 3 clinical trials. But what we have been doing is actually meeting with Brainstorm and Health Canada, and we have worked on facilitating a meeting between both organizations So the introductions have been made. We're very interested in making sure that the industry partners, no matter who they could be, because Brainstorm is just one of them, but we had meetings last week with other pharmaceutical companies to make sure they understand what the environment is in Canada, what the opportunity is, how engaged our community is, how connected our clinics are across the country, the infrastructure that's been set up, the investments that have been made, so that they can really see Canada as a viable market. And sometimes, in spite of some of the challenges that we've seen in this case with the delays in the reimbursement decisions. But that's why this work that we're doing right now is so critically important, because this is what's going to be precedent setting for future therapies. So when we're thinking about Brainstorm and Neurone or other therapies coming to market, the reason that we're focused right here, right now with the public campaign is this is the only place that it actually will make a difference, unless you want to start writing to the companies to make sure that they're considering Canada as a marketplace, but it's up to them to make the decisions. So I hope that that helps to answer that particular question around the therapy.
So we have another question about a reasonable time frame for the MPP to send a letter. Ryan, can I toss that one to you? What time frame should people be giving their MPPs to send the letter?
Yeah, that's a great question, Lauren. So 2 weeks is the basic framework that we use. Considering that you have gone in and provided them with a template, they understand what the ask is. This ask is set up for success. They get asked to write letters all the time. This is not a risky ask or an ask that would not be viewed as being reasonable or anything like that. So it's a very straightforward, a very simple ask. And I would expect that after a couple of weeks, if you haven't received a copy of the letter that they sent to the minister in your province, you should absolutely be back in contact with their office to ask and inquire as to when they think they will be in a position to send that letter. And again, to reiterate that you look forward to receiving a copy of the letter.
Thank you, Ryan. Are there any other questions that anyone has at this time? We'll give a couple minutes for people to type in.
And while we're waiting, I'd just like to say thank you to everyone who has been engaged in this campaign to be able to help bring forward the voices of the community. I really appreciate the efforts that people have gone to at this point, write letters, to be able to be involved in these webinars, to send us emails expressing your interest. We've heard of many people who have been working on it already, and we know how important it is. So thank you for your effort.
So another question that we have is, when do we want the community to start advocating? So we would like you to start right away. You know, if you're looking for a first step, of course, that there is the e-advocacy tool, and then as a second step, we encourage you to please download the advocacy packages. They are available on our website and ready to be used right away. And of course, you can contact the advocacy@als.ca email if you have any further questions. We also encourage you to contact to let people know if you are setting up meetings, so we know who is reaching out, and especially once you have meetings confirmed, so we know who has meetings and how we can make sure that you are feeling supported for those meetings. There is a question about the material available in French. So on our website, yes, the material is available in French. There is a Quebec version of the advocacy package, which has been customized for Quebec, that is in French, as well as the Ontario package is available in French. The letter writing campaign is also available in French, and again, that can be accessed at the same website. If you go to the top, you can switch over to French, and the webinars are in English only, but most of the other resources are available in both French and English. Any other questions? Okay, well, with that, we didn't need the full hour, which is great. We'll be giving everybody some time back in their evening and afternoons. Just want to again say thank you so much for taking the time to join us. And please, we encourage you to continue to keep an eye on social media and check back on the advocacy/Radicava Terrebonne website as resources will continue to be added onto that page.
We did receive one final question. Do you think that the online letter writing campaign is making a difference?
So it's Lisa. I'll jump in here, and then Ryan, also happy to get your perspective since you've done many of these kinds of campaigns before. The way that we've set this campaign up is intentionally with two pieces. One with the letter writing campaign that's an exercise in volume. So the more letters sent, the more the ministers of health across the country understand that it's an issue of importance. Whereas the advocacy package that we're taking you through today is a much more targeted and individual effort. We believe that both play an important role. And I think with the letter writing campaign, what that has been particularly helpful with us is to look at provinces where we've seen perhaps a larger proportional number of people sending letters, which then gives us opportunities for ALS Canada as well to potentially follow up with ministers of health or to work with our partners to support other ALS societies across the country and following up with their ministers of health. So it at least gives us an indication of where there is a high volume of letters being sent that might help us to further target our efforts with health ministers. But I think both pieces are important. Ryan, in your experience, is there anything else you'd want to add to that?
Yeah, just really to reiterate, Lisa, both pieces are critically important. And, just to remind everybody, advocacy is a process. And we utilize at Advocacy Solutions something we call the layering effect. And the layering effect is where you essentially build these activities on, one on top of one another. Sometimes they run concurrently, but really you're building a critical mass of noise or volume over a certain period of time. So we don't necessarily look at whether an individual activity has made, a difference per se. We really look at, has that individual activity fulfilled its role in the context of a larger layering process. And as Lisa has outlined for you, the first step has done absolutely exactly that. It has laid a wonderful foundation for the layering effect now of the second piece, which is this grassroots engagement by people like yourselves with the actual elected representatives at the provincial level. So it's played its role, as far as I'm concerned, and based on my experience, exceedingly well.
Great, thanks, Ryan. We've got a few more questions coming in, so we're actually going to keep going. One of the questions was, when speaking to my MPP, is it fair to say that not having access to Radicava and having it publicly funded would be like a person with cancer not having access to chemo treatment and having to pay for it out of pocket? So I'm going to turn this over to Lisa to address.
Sure. So just going back to the points that Ryan made earlier about, sharing your own personal story, personal experience. I think that, if that is something that you believe to be true and something that, you want to say to punctuate your point, feel free to do that. I don't think that there's anything necessarily inaccurate about that statement. I don't know if the question is about accuracy or not, but I think that, certainly we would say that there's an approved therapy in Canada, and it is shocking that people cannot have public access to it through the provincial health system. And there are many other diseases where that is possible for people. So the way that this question has been framed is very much in line with that. So I think if that's, something that you believe to be true and it resonates with you to say it, I don't have an issue with it. Ryan, do you have any other advice?
Yeah, the only thing I would do, I would caution, as always, Lisa, is to draw the distinction between what you believe to be the case based on your experience and how you feel versus what is a fact, an objective fact. So in the case of the former, absolutely, you should be able to, you should be encouraged to share, this is how I feel, this is my perspective, and I feel like, and then you could draw this comparison that's based on how you feel or an experience that you've had, which I think is kind of the spirit of the question that was asked. Where you have to be a little careful, though, is where you then bridge over into asserting that any of that content is somehow objectively factual. It may be in some cases, but in other cases it may not be objectively factual. It may be your opinion, it may be your perspective, which is of course different than an objective fact. So with that sort of broad caution in mind, otherwise absolutely it's perfectly appropriate for you to frame your perspective in that manner.
Okay. Thanks, Ryan. So there's another question about the ALS caucus and their role.
So in this case, the ALS caucus is actually a federal caucus made up of members of parliament and senators. So this particular campaign is now focused at a provincial level due to the fact that it is now within the provincial healthcare systems individually to determine whether or not they will reimburse the drug on their provincial formulary. That's not to say, though, that this issue isn't before the federal caucus, and I would suggest that we have continued our conversations with the caucus, particularly the chair at this point, but it will again be convening now that Parliament is back in session and post the election. And so we do keep this on the agenda as we're able to be able to identify that the access to therapies, equitable and timely access to therapies for all Canadians is such a critical point. The other place too is, of course, we keep this focused at Health Canada because one of the conversations that we have with them is, yes, you have a part to play and a very important part in drug approval, but don't you also have a part to play in ensuring that those drugs you approve get in the hands of Canadians? And so we continue to look at this at a more system level as well in terms of what can Health Canada do, talking about their package alignment with the FDA, or when we think about the process of going through CADIS and PMPRB and the rest of the alphabet soup, and how can they help to streamline the process, create greater transparency, have better patient engagement so that decisions are made in the interest and with the needs of the ALS community at the forefront, and that patients are also involved in that decision-making process. So those are both federal aspects of it, but as I say, this is focused at a provincial level. Now we are seeing another question regarding the price of Radicava through the insurance company, and this is getting into a lot of detail that we may not necessarily have before us right now. Someone has brought forward that they have an insurance program that covers a portion of it, and there's quite a bit of detail. I would like to get more detail on this. Again, I think if we are able to work at the provincial formulary level, that means that public reimbursement or reimbursement would be done through a public healthcare system and would reduce the need on the private healthcare insurance systems as well, potentially. So we might need to look into this and get some more answers for you. If you'd like, please feel free, the person who submitted this question, to email us at advocacy@als.ca, and we'll help coordinate some answers for you as we look further into this. I am seeing a question around drug codes and things if you want to ask your insurance company. MT Pharma does have a patient support program, and again, we can share that information in terms of access so that you would be able to have the emails or phone numbers for the patient support program that is necessary to be able to access it. They will be able to help navigate the insurance program. We have been told that there is now a public price that is available, so that if people wanted to be able to purchase the drug directly from the company, that is an opportunity that is priced at a point where they have a public price, and then they are helping to offset that by what the copay would be for insurance companies. Again, the company is going to be the best group to be able to help navigate that with their patient support program. And also, the ALS clinicians across the country at each of the clinics will also have this information. So we encourage you to go back and speak to your neurologist, because they will need to be the ones to help you be able to get the access required for your personal reason or for your personal situation. Great, we're getting a lot of questions in now. Is there a province which is ahead for public reimbursement? At this point, we don't have any specifics as to which two provinces are leading the public reimbursement negotiations, and we also don't know who is out. We have heard through the grapevine that it may follow similar suit to what it has been done with other drugs. So in looking at that, it may suggest that some of the Western provinces may have greater challenges around public reimbursement at this point. And we suspect some in more central Canada may be further along in their negotiations. But again, we don't have any specifics at this point. Okay, so those are the questions that we currently have. Again, if you have any others, please don't be afraid. Drop us a line at advocacy@als.ca, and we will see what information that we would be able to answer, or direct you to the sources that would have the information if possible.
Great. Thank you, everybody.
Great.
Thanks. Good night.
Bye-bye.